Hi. So, welcome. This is actually the last test of the series. So, thanks for listening. We'll keep you posted on further series when relevant. Okay, so this week we're going to jump into Perashat Naso. We're still not on the same track. So, here is Naso. In America, in Chuzar, it's Naso, and in Eretz Yisrael, it's Behalotcha. But I wanted to, there's a lot of different topics and a lot of things to talk about. And when I was thinking of what to talk about, I was thinking there's a lot of different topics to choose from. There's also ways to look at why are these topics all chosen together. Like it seems like a little bit of a hodgepodge. How does it fit? And I was, thinking of how to approach this because it's very open. But I decided in the end that I wanted to focus on something that always I don't want to say troubled, but always like put an alarm up for me a little bit because it just didn't really make sense to me. So I chose to look into a little bit more of that, and hopefully together we could bring more light on that. So the topic I want to talk about tonight is the sotah and the laws of the sotah and what happens there. So the sotah is a very unique case for many reasons, and I want to dive in and see the different facets and what they can teach us. So basically, the sotah is a woman. I mean, I'm obviously going to really simplify this to as an introduction, but the sotah is a woman who's been accused by her husband of infidelity. Now, this isn't just a simple accusation of, oh, I don't trust you, or you must be going around with other guys, or you're not being faithful. It's a very pointed accusation, the Hachamim say. It's basically that he says, I don't want you, previously, he has told her, I don't want you to be alone with this man. I suspect that something is going on with Johnny, so do not go be with Johnny and give me any other reason for suspicion. Don't be alone with him. Now, despite this warning, the wife does go be alone with this person and gives him validation to his accusation. And when they find that out, now he brings her to the Mishkan to go through this process. Okay, so again, this is a very specific situation. It's not just a husband that's angry at his wife, or a wife that's unfaithful to her husband. It's a very specific thing. Now, the woman is taken to the Mishkan, and the Kohen gives her, again, I'm simplifying this, the Kohen gives her a special drink, and excuse me, and the drink contains dirt from the Mishkan, a fat from the Mishkan, and a paper which was God's name was written on it. It is put in the water, and then the water is erased. The water erases the name, and she the Kohen tells her to promise she wasn't unfaithful with this man. He rips off her, he uncovers her hair, or it says, to make it wild, tera. So he does sort of either uncover her hair or open her hair in an embarrassing way. He rips her clothes. This is a very it's a huge scene. People hear about it, they'll come watch. It's almost when you think about it, it's almost like like the witch trials, when they would go burn the witches and in Salem and all that. So it's sort of like that. Like it's a big scene, it's a big whole big thing, and it's a very obviously embarrassing thing for the woman and the man, to say that his wife did this thing. So the woman swears, again, she just swears that she hasn't committed the sin. She drinks the water, and if she did commit the sin, then then it says her insides and her stomach, her insides and her legs swell and fall, which is very weird description. But the Hachamim talk about this as some sort of maybe miscarriage of an illegitimate child. If if the man that she was with unfaithfully, if she got pregnant from him, that this is some sort of miscarriage, some sort of sickness. It's some sort of obviously physical thing that you don't want to happen. And if she doesn't, if she wasn't lying and she was faithful to her husband and she didn't, she wasn't with this person, with the other person, then it says she is blessed with a child. Now, to me, there's a lot of weird things going on here, right? First of all, maybe it's just me, but I think maybe other people would agree with me. But if my husband accused me of this and put me through this whole entire embarrassing process and I come out innocent, I'm not really sure I'd want to go and have a child with him at that point, right? I don't think our relationship would be on the best state after this, right? So what is going on here? Why does this seem to be a fix for the relationship as opposed to something that doesn't really seem like the relationship is going all that well? Second of all, why are there no other magical lie detector tests, so to speak, for other mitzvot, right? If I think someone steals from me and I say, oh, she stole my car, whatever, and I can't take that person to the Mishkan and have her have a drink or do any other sort of ritual to prove if she did it or not, right? We have to witnesses and court and proper proceedings, right? It's not, so why here is there this magic, this supernatural, miraculous, magical type of element here with the sotah, right? And thirdly, is why are we commanded to erase God's name, right? We know from the from Ten Commandments that this is a very bad thing to, desecrate or defile God's name. And here we are commanded to do that in this process. And lastly, there's other things too, but this is what I want to discuss. Lastly, why is this event or this commandment or how the situation in here in Sefer Bimidbar and not in Sefer Vayikra, where we talk about Mishkan related things, right? You would think this is a very big Mishkan centered event, right? The woman comes in the Mishkan and the people will come see it and they'll watch it. It's in the Mishkan and the Kohen and the water and the dust of the Mishkan. It's a whole thing. Why is this not written in Vayikra along with other Mishkan related things? So now that we have all these things brought up, let's try to make sense of them. Okay. So first thing to note here that I think helps us understand the process in a little bit of a weird way, but it helps us understand the process, is this process is voluntary. The woman has to agree to go through with it, right? Her husband isn't dragging her there. She agrees to go through with this process. And why would either of them, why would both of them agree to go through this process? It seems to be very humiliating. And second of all, it seems that, right, anyone whose spouse is accusing them of adultery and infidelity, obviously there's other things going on in the marriage, right? This marriage is a marriage in crisis. The husband clearly does not trust his wife, right? And the wife obviously gave the husband reason not to trust her, right? So it's both parties involved are not in the best situation. And however, they can choose, right? They can choose to say, we're done with this and get a divorce, right? That's an option, right? Judaism allows divorce. They can just say, our marriage is done. I don't trust you. You don't trust me. I may or may not be with this other guy, let's say, so to speak, or I may want to be, or I'm giving you reason to think that I'm with this other guy. You obviously don't trust me enough that even if I tell you no, you don't trust me. So they could say, forget it. I'm done. We're done with this. This is obviously a relationship at a crisis that's not working. However, instead, they decide to go through this whole procedure. Yes, most of it's happening to the wife, but the husband is obviously involved as well. Now, so why? Why would the wife especially, but either of them, why would they go through this process? So I think the answer comes to the fact that even though the marriage is in crisis, going through this process is showing that they want to repair and rebuild it, however damaged and complicated it may be to do that. Okay. And they need a higher power here to be involved, meaning the Kohen and God in this process, right? The woman is basically saying, I'm willing to go through this process of humiliation to show you that I want to make amends and I want to start fresh and give you reason to trust me again and rebuild our relationship, however hard it may be. Now, if we really think about that for a second, that's a big concept of repair and restarting and tshuva, that they got to the point that they're at the lowest of the low state in their relationship, and they're willing to accept that and move forward in that, even though they're at such a bad state, and they want to rebuild it. They don't want to walk away. They want to go through the dirt and go through the hard process and build and fix. And I think this point leads us to our next question, which what we brought up, which is what's the whole thing with this whole, supernatural lie detector thing, right? Validation from God. Now, God is saying the relationship, I think, I mean, obviously, this is my speculation. Obviously, I can't speak for God, but I think what's going on here is is that is that by doing this, God is showing or indicating that this relationship between husband and wife is so sacred and so important and foundational to the Jewish nation and the Jewish family and Jewish continuity, that He's willing to intervene in a supernatural way to help repair it. And when the husband and wife both say, I'm willing to go through this extreme publicly humiliating process to prove that I want to have a clean slate and start over, God is basically saying, I'm going to help with that. I'm going to give you that confidence to see that you're both, choosing to start over. And even to the extent, which is going to take us to the next step, of having his name erased in the waters, right? And erased for the sake of the couple, right? So he's, even though erasing God's name is such, and desecrating God's name is such a terrible thing, God's saying here in this process, I'm willing to, so to speak, defer my kavod, my pride, to help fix the situation. Now, I think there also is, on the flip side, that seems like a very nice positive message, even in the hardest situation. We're going to build, we're going to try to fix it. But I think there's another side of this, a less rosy and nice situation, is that this process saves the woman's life. Now, what do I mean by that? Unfortunately, I mean, even till today, open up the news. It's unfortunate, but there's not a shortage of domestic abuse situations, and that are caused a lot of times by jealousy, or and lack of trust, and that leads to domestic violence, domestic abuse, and even in extreme cases, into murder or in honor killings. And this is God's way of saying, yes, you might have reason to accuse your wife and be jealous, but I will take the verdict into my hands to make sure that the woman is not harmed. So I think this is also a very pro, woman feminist, showing the Torah is that even though on the one hand, this seems like a very degrading situation, if we look at other cultures, right, and the idea of honor killings, where if any woman is suspected of being with another man, she would be stoned publicly by her father and brother and cousins and all her relatives. So this is avoiding that. And by the way, very important to note that the Hachamim say, and it's also said that this process of sotah only works when the husband is infallible and faithful himself in the area of fidelity, right? Obviously, no one's perfect, but he obviously can't be unfaithful as well. And then she's going to get punished, but he was also unfaithful and he's not getting punished. And this is actually an interesting point that they make, is that they say, if a husband brings his wife and accuses her and brings her to do this whole sotah procedure, and he himself has been unfaithful, and then she won't die, she won't get punished because he was also unfaithful. And now this makes it look like this is a very bad thing, because then the woman's going to say, oh, wow, this sotah situation is a joke because I was unfaithful to my husband and it didn't work. And telling, other women like, oh, look, see, you could, like spreading this idea of infidelity because the sotah doesn't work, the mei sotah. So there's actually another side of that as well, that the man bringing it should make sure that he's bringing it from a clean place in his end. And as well, when the whole nation as a whole is acting in a state of immorality and unfaithfulness to their spouses and to God, right, and doing avodah zarah and doing gilui arayot and doing all these bad things, it's all the sotah ends up becoming null and void. We see this in the Nevi'im, and especially in the end, before the Galut and in the Second Temple period, especially. Where the nation was doing so much, horrible acts of avodah zarah and unfaithfulness, and they were all, having not only not only were they not being faithful to their wives, but they were going with non-Jewish women, to make it even worse than it is. So, and then there was no sotah because it wouldn't work. So this makes sense. This also shows us why God would go through all the trouble, so to speak, to preserve these relationships, because a big part of our value system is is the family unit, is continuity of that. And if you're not valuing the relationships and as a whole, as a community, then God's not going to be involved in that, right? So that's just I think an additional point of what's going on here. Now, in terms of why this is written in Bamidbar and not Vayikra, I think the answer can give us understanding to the theme of Vayikra, and also give us an insight into marriage. So we spoke last week about Vayikra leading into Bamidbar, and how we sort of transitioned from God being the center, God, the center, and God, our relationship with God being in the Mishkan, to then branching out to God being in the Machaneh itself, right? So we branch out from Vayikra, where it's the Kohanim and the Leviim and the Mishkan and the Korbanot, and then we come into Bimidbar, where it talks about the Mishkan, where it talks about the Machaneh, about the camp, about all the people, right? All the other people in the nation and their individual connections with God. Now the sotah being in Bamidbar shows us that God Hashem is not only in the Machaneh as a whole, but he's in each and every individual household in the Machaneh, and each and every marriage and relationship, if we choose to bring him in there. Okay, so when a couple is building their home properly and building their relationship as a partnership, as one of mutual respect, as cooperation, with love, it is an ideal relationship, and they're working on it. Obviously not perfect, but they have those paradigms and those pillars. Then God is essentially involved in helping them in that relationship. And many times, as we know, throughout the Tanakh, the relationship with us and God is compared to one of a husband and wife. And we see this especially in Shir HaShirim, and that analogy of a love story. And this shows us that a healthy marriage should mirror a healthy relationship with God. So when the marriage isn't healthy, God himself, so to speak, steps in this process sotah to fix it. And this is why I think it is written here in Bamidbar, because we take that closeness with God that we built in the Mishkan, and we want to bring it into our own homes and our own personal relationships. So I think that's the lesson here. And as well, it shows us a insight into marriage of our goal as a couple should be to work on that mirroring that relationship, of our relationship being a mirror for how we should view God, and our relationship with God is a mirror to how we view our spouse. And now I want to look into a little bit of the seemingly odd process of the water. I keep talking about the water, but let's look into it a minute. We mix this water with ash, right? With the ash and with the name of God, and we turn it into this sort of like, truth serum almost. And essentially, this will hopefully, if she wasn't unfaithful, give the impetus for a reset on the couple's marriage, right? Because now she could say, see, I wasn't unfaithful, and now let's move forward. You could trust me again, and they could, rebuild their relationship. This is a chance for a clean slate, rebuild the confidence in each other, and they both want to start over. And interestingly enough, if we think about it, this mirrors another time where people drink water with ash, and it restarted a relationship. And this is after Chet HaEgel. So with Chet HaEgel, right, what happened? Moshe comes down, they did Chet HaEgel. He ends up burning the egel and making it into like a dust, right? And he makes it into some sort of dust. He puts that in water, and the people drink it. And basically, essentially, whoever was unfaithful to God ends up getting killed and dying. So whoever was, participated in the sin. So this year is saying that was on a national level of, being unfaithful to God. And we have this dirt in the, this ash in the water, this dirt in the water, that is helping us identify those. And this leads to the reset of switching the Bechorot from the Bechorot, the firstborns, from working in the Mishkan to having the Leviim work in the Mishkan. As well as another important thing is, as well as Moshe demanding God be with us as a nation, even though we are challenging and we are an unfaithful nation at times, but to not give up on us and to not give up on the relationship with us and not send a malach or a second intermediary. So this really, on a national level, does sort of a sotah type of situation with us and God. And now if we look even, which is interesting, if we look even further back to a time where dirt and water were mixed, we see in a very extreme case, we could look at the time of the flood of Noah, right, or the Mabul. So the earth was completely destroyed and covered with water, and all the, the Adamah was mixed up. Everything was all, connected. And then we had a reset of humanity with Noah and his family, right? And there too, we have the Brit of the Keshet, the covenant of the rainbow, where God says, I will accept humanity with its failings, and I will not send the flood again. And we essentially use this. And there too, by the way, Noah is commanded to then pruvu and to have more children and populate the world, as the sotah is told that she'll be blessed with a child. So essentially, this use of dust and water, it goes from, if we look in Noah's story, it has a reset of the whole world, right, essentially. And in the Chet HaEgel, we have a national reset. And in the sotah, we have an individual reset. And now I think this is very interesting, because we see when something is tainted to begin with, and there's a challenge or a crisis or a crack, or however you want to call it, in a relationship, there's this idea of water and dirt. And it helps us lead to this purity. But interestingly enough, I think, obviously this is my speculation, but when the relationship is going well, the ideal way to reconnect in a relationship is through mikveh, right? After a woman is nida, she goes to the mikveh. And when she goes to the mikveh, she has to be fully clean with no dirt or no separations whatsoever into the pure waters. And this is a time in the mikveh where she's reconnecting with herself, and then giving her the ability to reconnect with herself, reconnect with God, and then reconnect with her husband, and ideally bring that into their home, all this positivity and spirituality. So I think this is if we look at it in a way, the mikveh is the ideal situation where we use pure waters and no dirt and no chatzitzot and no separations, and we immerse ourselves completely. Whereas when the relationship is in crisis, we need sort of this dirt to cleanse us and to sift out, so to speak, that process and that problem that we had. And by the way, the waters are called me amarim hame'arerim, the bitter, cursed waters. Okay, so these waters are not waters of purification. They're bitter and cursed, and they basically sort of get it out of you in a way, where the mikveh are mayim teorim, right? You say they're tahor, okay? And also with the mikveh itself, it has to be rainwater, it has to be, natural source, it has to be, very pure waters. So where does this all leave us now, right? We obviously don't have sotah now, right? So what is the takeaway from this, right? If now someone in their marriage is suspecting their wife or their spouse of being unfaithful, they can't just go and do this, process and know for sure and say, let's start over, right? So where does this leave us today? So I think it's number one, it shows us something to strive for and to work towards, and to look at that idea of mirroring our marriage, our relationship with our spouse to our relationship with God, and using that as a mirror. I also think it shows us that if both partners are willing to put in the work, there is hope for the relationship, right? So like we said, this process is voluntary. They could have gotten divorced, but instead they went through this process to prove to their commitment to each other to rebuild. Now, what this can look like today, right, is it can look like, the spouse is saying, okay, we're at a really bad situation, the partner is saying to each other, and we really hit rock bottom, and now we have to go to therapy. It can, and work it out like that. It can look like making compromises for each other. It can look like, in certain cases, giving up certain things or taking on certain things or whatever it may be in that particular circumstance. But basically doing something big and something to shift the status quo of the relationship that isn't working. And the point being is that it may not be simple, but the work is there and it can be done, and it's worth it if you have the motivation and the want and the desire to save the relationship. And it also shows us something, which I think is one of the most important takeaways, is that God is very involved and invested in our human relationships if we bring him in it, right? What does that mean? If we build a life of Torah and mitzvah, and God will partner with us as individuals and as a couple and help our life succeed, right? The same way we talked about a few weeks ago about the curses and the blessings, if we follow as a nation, if we follow God's ways individually as well, right? If we as an individual and as a couple are following, living a life of Torah mitzvah and commitment to God, then our life, our home life, our family, will be more successful. Hope will thrive more than if we're living a life of doing not good things. So in the end, I think what the sotah is teaching us is that it's taking the intense, deep connection that we had on Har Sinai with God, and this ideal, crazy, relationship, closeness that we had, and then we take it to the Mishkan, right, on a more tangible level, and then we take it into the Machaneh, even on a more tangible level than that, and then we take it into our homes. And I think, as a whole, as the hope of Sefer B'Midbar, is really teaching us the lesson in many different ways. But I think also, especially in we spoke here on Sotah, but it's showing us how to strive and how to get to that. And I really hope that, that we all have the strength and devotion and ability to do that, in all our interpersonal relationships, in all our houses, with all our families, and with God, and as a nation, hopefully, right, in Eretz Yisrael. Thank you, and keep a lookout for more series, and I hope to see you again soon.